Imagine for a moment that you are walking through a remote valley and discover something that sends chills down your spine, a location where the remains of dozens of infants and young children lay. This isn't a scene from a horror movie, folks. It truly existed thousands of years ago, when our ancestors faced a brutal reality that we can't even imagine today. In prehistoric times, having a child wasn't the celebration we know now. It was a gamble against death, a game of Russian roulette where the odds were completely stacked against survival. Archaeologists have uncovered sites where more than half of the bones belonged to children who never reached the age of 5. But here we are, right? We've survived as a species. Not only did we survive, but we multiplied to conquer the entire planet. This is the story of how our ancestors achieved the impossible, creating families and preserving humanity when everything seemed to conspire against life itself. 40,000 years ago, the world was an entirely different place for starting a family. Imagine pregnant women without hospitals, doctors, or even basic medicine. Giving birth was literally a life or death situation each time. Infant mortality was devastating. Studies from archaeological sites show that between 40% and 60% of children died before they turned 5. It was so common that prehistoric families wouldn't even name their children until after they'd survived their first year of life. Women faced terrible risks during pregnancy. Without medical knowledge, any complication could be fatal. Difficult births, infections, and lack of proper nutrition turned every pregnancy into a dangerous adventure. Many mothers died during childbirth, leaving their babies orphaned from day one. The babies that did manage to be born had to confront a hostile world. Infections were the leading cause of infant death. A simple cold could turn into a fatal pneumonia. Diseases that we can treat today with antibiotics were death sentences for these little ones. Feeding was another monumental challenge. If the mother died in childbirth, the baby had little chance of survival. There were no infant formulas or bottles. Babies were entirely dependent on breast milk, and if that wasn't available, their fate was sealed. But something incredible happened. Despite all these hardships, our ancestors didn't give up. They developed strategies, rituals, and support systems that increased their chances of survival. They didn't have modern science, but they had something just as powerful: the determination to keep their species alive. Can you imagine what it meant to be a parent back then? If this content is opening your eyes to our origins, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more fascinating stories like this. These prehistoric families weren't like ours. There wasn't a mom, dad, and 2 kids living in a pretty house. The family was the entire tribe, and raising children was a communal responsibility. When a woman became pregnant, she instantly became the center of attention within the group. Older women surrounded her, sharing their knowledge and preparing to assist with the birth. It was like having a medical team, but comprised of experienced grandmothers who had seen it all. Men also had their roles. While women took care of direct nurturing, men ensured there was enough food and protection. They hunted more intensively, gathered medicinal plants, and built safer shelters. The entire group organized around the arrival of the new member. Childbirth was a community event. Experienced women acted as midwives, using techniques they had learned from their mothers and grandmothers. They knew which plants alleviated pain, positions that made childbirth easier, and rituals that empowered the mother. They lacked scientific knowledge, but had centuries of accumulated experience. Once the baby was born, caregiving was shared. If the mother died, another woman in the group would immediately take over. Children weren't orphans in the modern sense, because the whole tribe was their family. They had multiple moms and dads who looked after them. Breastfeeding was also a communal practice. Women who had milk nursed babies that weren't their own. It was normal for a child to be fed by several different women. This practice not only ensured the survival of the infants, but also created strong bonds throughout the community. The children who survived their early years became the responsibility of everyone. Adults taught them essential skills: how to make fire, how to identify edible plants, and how to hunt small animals. Education began very early because survival depended on each group member being useful. Raising children in prehistoric times required much more than love and care. Our ancestors became experts in natural medicine, nutrition, and survival techniques that meant the difference between life and death for their children. Knowledge of medicinal plants was crucial. Older women knew exactly which herbs to use for each problem. plants that helped with fever, leaves that healed wounds, roots that eased stomach pain. This knowledge was carefully passed down from mother to daughter, because a mistake could be fatal. Feeding babies after weaning was an art in itself. They couldn't simply give them any food. They had to pre-chew some items to make them easier to digest. They prepared special porridge with fruits, ground nuts, and well-cooked meat. It was like the first homemade baby food. Techniques for protecting against the cold were crucial. Babies were wrapped in multiple layers of soft hides, kept close to the fire constantly, and slept snug against their mothers' bodies to share body heat. The cold was a silent killer, and our ancestors knew it all too well. To protect children from diseases, they developed surprisingly advanced cleansing rituals. They used boiled water to wash babies, burned certain plants to purify the air, and kept the sick away from young children. They didn't understand germs, but they did understand contagion. Toys and tools for children were also significant. They crafted rattles from bones and stones, dolls made of clay and animal skins, and tiny bows for kids to practice hunting. These weren't just toys, they were learning tools that prepared children for adulthood. Protection rituals were a constant part of life. They hung amulets in cribs, performed ceremonies to ward off evil spirits, and created protective symbols on the walls of their shelters. While they may not have had science, they had faith, and that faith provided hope during the toughest times. Dental care was equally important. They used special sticks to clean children's teeth, provided plants that strengthened gums, and avoided foods that could harm their teeth. They understood that a child with dental problems would struggle to eat and survive. Can you see how sophisticated our ancestors were? If you want to keep discovering incredible secrets about our origins, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Family life in prehistoric times had rhythms and traditions that might seem strange to us today, but were fundamental to survival and group cohesion. Each day, each season, each stage of life had its own rules and ceremonies. Children did not have childhoods like we know today. From a very young age, they had responsibilities. At 3 years old, kids helped gather fruits and plants. By 5, they looked after babies. At 7, they participated in small hunts. This wasn't cruelty, it was necessity. Every extra pair of hands meant better chances for the entire group's survival. The relationships between parents and children were more intense than they are now. Parents weren't just caregivers, they were teachers, protectors, and survival companions. The emotional connection was strong because they understood that at any moment they could lose each other. Every day spent together was a gift. Rituals marking growth were significant milestones. When a child survived their first year, there was a special celebration. Learning to walk, saying their first words, and hunting their first animal were all celebrated with ceremonies that reinforced family and community bonds. Education was purely practical. There were no schools or books. Children learned by watching, imitating, and practicing. A boy learned to hunt by accompanying adult hunters. A girl learned to gather plants by following the older women. It was a full-time education, every day throughout childhood. Play was educational too. Kids played pretend hunting with small bows, built shelters from branches, and identified edible plants. These games not only entertained but also prepared them for adult responsibilities. Play was learning, and learning meant survival. Stories and legends served as the era's entertainment. Adults told tales of successful hunts, life-saving plants, and dangers to avoid. These stories didn't just entertain children, they transferred vital knowledge in memorable ways. Can you imagine growing up in a world where every day is a lesson in survival? Do you think today's children would be able to adapt to such a life? Amid the daily struggle for survival, something extraordinary happened. Our ancestors not only kept their families alive, but they also created emotional bonds and traditions that gave meaning to life, even in the hardest times. Funeral rituals for children were especially important. When a child passed away, the entire community participated in elaborate ceremonies. They buried them with toys, amulets, and food for the journey to the afterlife. These rituals not only honored the deceased little ones, but also helped parents process their grief and find hope to continue. The names of children carried deep meanings. They were not just labels, they held wishes, protections, and hopes. A child could be named strong as a bear, swift as the wind, or protected by ancestors. The name was like a constant prayer for the child's survival. Lullabies were more than entertainment. They were protective spells, sung remedies, and maps of knowledge passed down through generations. A lullaby could contain information about which plants to use for fevers, which animals to avoid, or what weather signs indicated danger. Protection rituals were constant. They painted protective symbols on children's bodies, hung amulets above their beds, and held special ceremonies during eclipses and storms. While they didn't have science, they had faith, and that faith gave them strength to keep fighting. Family celebrations were community events. When a child had a birthday, when a girl experienced her first menstruation, or when a young person killed their first large animal, the whole tribe took part. These celebrations not only marked individual growth, but also reinforced community identity and cohesion. Knowledge transfer was sacred. Grandparents were living libraries, holding centuries of wisdom. Children sat at their feet, listening to stories that contained maps, recipes, survival techniques, and life lessons. Losing an elder was like losing an entire encyclopedia. Art and creativity also had their place. Kids learned to draw on cave walls, create figures with clay, and play simple musical instruments. These activities not only nurtured creativity, but also taught them manual skills that would be useful in making tools and weapons. What do you think about the importance they placed on rituals and traditions? Do you think we've lost something significant by abandoning many of these practices today? When we look back at this remarkable time, we realize that our ancestors left us lessons about family and parenting that are more relevant today than ever. In a world where families are changing and challenges differ, we can learn a lot from those who raised children under the most challenging conditions in history. The first lesson is about the importance of community in parenting. Our ancestors showed us that raising children is not just the job of two people, it's a responsibility of the whole community. Every adult was responsible for every child. This lesson is crucial for us today, as many families feel isolated and overwhelmed. The second lesson is about practical preparation for life. Prehistoric children learned real skills from a very young age. There was no distinction between play and learning, between education and survival. This lesson reminds us that we must prepare our children for the real challenges of life, not just for school tests. The third lesson emphasizes the value of every life. Because infant mortality was so high, every child who survived was considered a miracle. Parents didn't take their children's lives for granted. Every day was a blessing. This perspective can help us appreciate our children more and not take the gift of life lightly. We also learned about the importance of resilience. Prehistoric parents faced the loss of children with a frequency that would be devastating to us today. But they didn't give up. They kept trying. They held on to hope, and they continued to build families. This emotional strength is something we can admire and learn from. Their techniques in natural medicine show us the importance of understanding our environment. They knew exactly which plants to use for each health issue. While we have modern medicine, we can also benefit from a better understanding of natural remedies and the resources nature provides. The significance they placed on rituals and traditions teaches us that families need ceremonies and customs that unite them. In our modern world, where everything changes so quickly, family traditions can be the anchor that keeps us connected and gives us identity. Finally, they taught us that love and dedication can overcome any obstacle. Despite all the challenges, our ancestors managed to raise children, form families, and keep humanity alive. Their love for their children was so strong that it triumphed over death, cold, hunger, and all the dangers of their world. Which of these lessons do you think is most important for families today? Do you believe we could apply some of these principles in our modern parenting? And so, my friends, when life was a constant struggle against death, our ancestors not only survived, but laid the foundation of what it means to be a family. Every child born in that difficult time, every mother who fought to keep her baby alive, every father who worked tirelessly to protect his family contributed to our being here today. The remains of infants found in archaeological sites are not just a tragedy. They are also a testament to human determination. For every child who died, there were parents who didn't give up, who kept trying, who kept the hope alive that the next generation would have better opportunities. Prehistory teaches us that being a family is not just about blood, but about commitment. Our ancestors showed us that when everyone comes together to care for the children, when the whole community takes responsibility for the next generation, when love overcomes obstacles, life finds a way to continue. The next time you see your family, remember your ancestors. They faced death every day and still found a way to create life, to pass on knowledge, and to build the future. If they were able to form strong families amidst the most brutal struggle for survival, we can face any family challenge that comes our way. This story reminds us that being a parent means more than just giving life. It means protecting, teaching, loving, and preparing our children for the world they will inherit. Our ancestors gave us the greatest gift of all, the proof that familial love can overcome any adversity. When the world was filled with infant remains, our ancestors chose life. They chose love. They chose hope. And that's why we are here to tell this incredible story. If these stories about our origins have touched your heart, share this video with your family and friends. The story of how families began is too important to keep to ourselves. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more content that will make you appreciate the people you love even more.